There's not really anything quite like Power Rangers. What about Super Sentai? Shut up, you know what I mean. Its unique production process, its generally good to amazing action, its unapologetic cheesiness.
No one gets inside our circle!
No one gets inside!
No one gets inside!
No one gets inside!
No one gets inside!
And with the show as long running that's undergone so many changes over its life, naturally fans have a lot of opinions on its best and worst facets. Best season, best ranger, best villain, worst villain. And then there's the Herculean task of picking a favorite from the 973 episodes that comprise the series thus far. But back in 2003, when less than half those episodes existed, we received what's probably the closest we could ever come to an objective answer to that question. This is the Best of Power Rangers, the Ultimate Rangers. Kind of awkward to say that aloud, actually. A DVD collecting the 5 best episodes of the series through Wild Force as voted on by fans at the time. I actually first got into the franchise with 2003's season, Ninja Storm, so I ended up getting this myself. It was probably the first hook that got me interested in the pre-Disney seasons, and the main reason I knew who Tommy was when he showed up in Dino Thunder. But there's always been a couple lingering questions in my mind about this DVD. Why were these specific episodes voted on, and were they really worthy of such illustrious positions? That's what we're here to discuss today. I'm going to be going through all 5, technically 8 since 3 of them are two-parters, episodes on the DVD, seeing how good they are both for the time and by modern standards, ranking them against each other, and seeing if the fans of 2 decades ago made good decisions or were just infatuated with Andros' hair. But before we begin, we might as well act like me at any bookstore or movie aisle and pour over the back cover like an archaeologist reading hieroglyphs. Ah yes, my favorite evil Zord, Serpentera. And apparently in space had beast machines. Wait a minute, what? I refuse to believe this was accidental.
I should have been the one to fill your dark soul with light!
So, brief recap. Main character Tommy Oliver recently lost his Green Ranger powers permanently and consequently decided to spend some time out of town to think about stuff. This episode picks up with the other Rangers learning Tommy will be back in a few days, but that's about the end of their luck. Lord Zed decides to both capture Tommy to brainwash him, again, and transform a statue of a fist into an electricity monster. Yes, I have the same questions as you.
Nimrod, the Scarlet Sentinel!
Is this better or worse than any of these names? At the same time, Bulk and Skull find a golden barrel that fall from the sky and become convinced it will help their mission of finding the Rangers' identities. And somehow they may actually be right, as said barrel contains previous villain Rita Repulsa after being ousted by Lord Zed. And on top of all that, Zoran and Alpha choose now to vanish for some secret project. Great timing, guys. After fighting some putties, the Rangers explore the powered-down command center while Tommy is teleported away by... obviously it's Zed. The Rangers look into some recovered data but are interrupted by the monster going active. The fight doesn't go well. Behold, Power Rangers editors creating a prototype YouTube poop, and Billy ditches his friends to investigate the command center again. He discovers a secret chamber where Zoran and Alpha are literally building a new Ranger and leaves to tell the others. Soon after, Zoran and Alpha finish their work and summon the Rangers to meet the new White Ranger, who turns out to be... Bulk! Now, we'd have to wait almost 25 years for Paul Schreier as a Ranger. It's actually Tommy who gets a cool new set of powers and also leadership of the team because it's Tommy, and the franchise hasn't yet canonized the idea of Red Rangers being mystically fated to be leaders. No, seriously, that's a thing.
You have been chosen to be leader of the Power Rangers Wild Force.
If the Morphin Grid chose you to be the Red Ranger, it means it's reacting to something within you.
While the other Rangers are sent to stop Bulk and Skull from releasing Rita, Tommy is sent to fight Nimrod with his new Zord. After teaming up with Jason's Zord, which I think may be on autopilot, the White Tiger combines with the other Thunder Zords and destroys the monster by throwing a bird at it. Honestly, a really good tactic. The gang celebrates Tommy's returns, and Bulk and Skull get some egg on their faces. Egg is used in cakes, I'm technically correct. To start, I think it's worth talking about the attempts at making the White Ranger a big mystery.
Reveal your identity.
See the newest Mighty Morphin Power Ranger Monday on Fox Kids.
I'm not going to get into red herrings from the last few episodes, but it is interesting how much this one really seems to want to make you think it's not Tommy. Most striking to me is cutting from Tommy being captured to Zed saying, "Everything is going according to plan," implying he really was the one to capture Tommy. Though let's be real, it's still pretty obvious, and apparently a commercial on some VHS tape straight up spoiled this before the episode even aired.
You also know Tommy as the White Ranger.
Speaking of Zed, the episode accidentally renders his actions a bit clumsy and incoherent, especially on a second viewing. He starts off wanting to brainwash Tommy and unleash a new monster at the same time, and then he seemingly forgets the first part of the plan and throws his attention into Halfwit. Just summoning another monster like any other episode. We even see him deliberately activate Imbecile early, making it hilariously lucky the monster ended up as powerful as it did.
We must celebrate. The Green Ranger will soon return to the dark side and take his place as heir to my throne.
This is immediately after Zed starts on Buffoon and before he does anything about Tommy, by the way. Maybe Zed really was better off after he married Rita. Speaking of things getting randomly dropped, am I the only one who thinks the finale was really weird? The other Rangers had to fight some putties, save for Billy and Trainee, who are preparing the Zords, but we never see any conclusion to their fight, and even when their Zords are revived, they don't show up? Jason's Red Dragon gets some decent time fighting alongside the Tiger Zord, but I honestly can't tell if he's even piloting it. If he is in there, Jason just goes completely silent, which is very uncharacteristic for this show, though I think it might be funnier to imagine Tommy just shook hands with the autopilot. Where the episode shines is in atmosphere, pacing, and spectacle. It opens with a barrage of bad things happening. New monster, Rita reappearing, the command center going quiet, and Tommy getting abducted. The scenes in the powered-off command center are surprisingly tense. Sure, it's just the place with the main lights off, but in tandem with a mystery about what Zordon and Alpha are up to, it all feels very mysterious. The music helps us a lot. I don't think Ron Wasserman gets enough credit for his more subtle tracks as opposed to the more action-y rock songs. Oh, speaking of music, I like how when Tommy enters the battle, it starts off as a version of the old Green Ranger theme, then transitions into the new White Ranger theme when he starts riding the Tiger Zord.
Yeah, it works! Alright! Woohoo!
Jeez, look at him hop around, you'd think he was a little kid under that suit. Wait, he actually was in the Sentai? Anyway, this mysteriousness eventually gives way to the reveal of the White Ranger, him descending from above in a literal white light before triumphantly showing that Tommy is back and here to stay. The other Rangers are certainly happy about it, and it's nice to see them get some levity from the dire straits they're in at the moment, especially Tommy's reunion with Kimberly.
We were all hoping it would be you.
Lying is a sin, Billy.
How come Tommy couldn't have gotten these powers? I mean, he's already one of us.
Kim's right. I mean, who's this new guy?
And then there's Tommy's fight with Simpleton, which strikes a great balance. It shows off his powers, makes him look strong, but has him struggle just enough that the fight isn't effortless and boring. Him getting to do this on his own, until the other Zords show up, helps with this. It also helps we get to see the Tiger Zord actually fight Nincompoop, as opposed to just showing a bunch of disconnected attack and reaction shots. Jutsu is a blessing and a curse. The fight ends in the same way as any other MMPR fight.
White Tiger Thunderbolt, armed and ready!
Specifically being weird about Sentai footage, and we end off with an exhausted Bulk and Skull screaming at an action figure. Bulk and Skull's subplot was kinda disappointing. Them getting involved with Rita is potentially funny, but after they get the barrel, they just end up stuck trying to open it. It picks up at the end when they actually see Rita and when they're talking to Trainee and Kimberly afterward, but otherwise it's kind of a waste of their talents. This episode does play up how much bigger and importanter it is than your average Power Rangers story, but when you get down to it, it's really not much more than a popcorn flick like an average Power Rangers experience. It's a good popcorn flick, and it does succeed at feeling like a big event. Did you notice there wasn't a real normal life subplot here? But I don't feel compelled to rewatch it as a story. And I don't mean this as an insult. I've long since come to terms with the fact that Power Rangers, especially early on, was a toy-selling spectacle that sometimes has time to tell a truly engaging story. But will the rest of the top 5 manage to find that time? Let's find out.
This time, his powers have been created by the light of goodness and can never be taken away by the forces of evil.
About that.
It's the final countdown to destruction?
Okay, I'm just putting this out there. Does anyone else find it really disconcerting when openings have the cast members smile directly at the camera? So, brief recap, the villain Astronema is actually Corone, the sister of Red Ranger Andros, and tried to turn good recently, only to be turned evil again by some wires getting shoved in her face. We open on Astronema being ordered by Dark Spectre, the actual real, I swear for sure this time, big boss of all villainy, to commence an attack on the entire universe and conquer it once and for all. All the show's past villains are shown attacking various worlds, even old extra Rangers, as Astronema has a captured Zordon plopped on her ship. Oh, hold on a minute. Zane, the Silver Ranger, ditches the rebels he's working with to help the other Rangers, who soon catch a particularly large force bearing down on Earth. Fighters strike Angel Grove, and presumably other cities, with an attack bigger and more destructive than anything it's ever seen. The Rangers try to fight the invaders and rescue civilians, but strength in numbers doesn't get enough credit sometimes. Later, the bounty hunter Trakeena betrays the evil forces by stealing a planet-destroying missile to use on Dark Spectre, getting blown up himself in the process. This allows Astronomer to take full control of the evil forces herself, and she soon beams down to Earth.
The rest of the universe has surrendered.
Forgive me if I don't believe you conquered all 93 billion light years of the universe. Astronomer demands the Power Rangers be handed over to her, or she'll destroy the planets. I don't think that's an option anymore, actually. Bulk and Skull convince the other civilians to keep their faith, while the Rangers themselves make plans. Andros wants to try and talk to his sister. No one else does. Andros flies off anyway after a final farewell to Ashley, the Yellow Ranger.
Red, battleized Ranger!
Shane the Quantrons heard him and immediately shot him down. The next day, Astronomer prepares to destroy Earth. However, Bulk, Skull, and various other civilians pretend to be Rangers to defend the real ones. The real ones then get their shit together and step up themselves. They enter the fight, and Bulk and Skull once more prove their mettle by leading the civilians to aid them.
So maybe we could organize them. Maybe we could find a way to— We can't risk their lives.
Whoops. Meanwhile, Andros infiltrates the Dark Fortress. Did it take him all night to fly up there? Actually, I suppose that is pretty realistic. He finds Zordon and is excited to see him until he says only the power of murder can save the universe, specifically murdering Zordon. Andros refuses to kill Zordon and ends up killing Astronomer on accident when she attacks him, and Andros reflects one of her shots back at her. Ecliptor, the other evil general, breaks in and swears vengeance on Andros, but Andros finally manages to shatter Zordon's tube, releasing an energy wave that annihilates the entire United Alliance of Evil. So we got a big finale to one era of a franchise that brings back a bunch of old villains and heroes alike and ends with the bad guys all turning to dust. Interesting. Andros flies the Dark Fortress down to Earth.
It's Astronomer. She's won.
Wait, how do you come to that conclusion? Andros emerges with his sister's body, but crying on Corone causes her to wake up and lose her evil circuitry and red hair. Because we all know red is the color of evil. Wait. Sometime later, the Rangers are helping Andros and Corone's homeworld rebuild, but the Earth Rangers are preparing to return home. Andros initially stays behind, but ends up sneaking on the Astro Megaship alongside Corone and Zane.
My home is with you guys.
You can't escape the found family trope. So, yeah, this episode has a lot more delicious story meat than White Light. I mean, it was the finale of one of the franchise's most beloved seasons, almost the finale of the show as a whole, so yeah.
No love, no happiness.
Do these people actually enjoy being evil, or is this all just a contractual obligation? The return of old villains, seeing characters like the Phantom Ranger and Zeo Gold get curb stomped, and especially the attack on Angel Grove really sell this as the final battle. Sure, Angel Grove has been attacked so many times Marvel's New York is blushing, but this time there's far more destruction and I find this key, we actually linger on it. Usually when a Zord fight ostensibly knocks down buildings and the like, the episode just moves on when the monster blows up. But here, the city spends more than half the runtime covered in rubble and flames, with civilians visibly disheveled and wounded. The ruins serve for a striking and unique set piece, especially for the nighttime scenes in the middle. The civilians are genuinely on the verge of giving up on the Rangers at one point, but this is turned around by the actions of Bulk and Skull. These guys are the only characters who have had a consistent presence throughout the whole series up to this point, if you include the one time they got turned into chimps for a few episodes, and this has allowed them to grow and develop beyond a two-dimensional mold. And I love that little handshake they share, cementing that they went through their journey together and are proud to be friends and comrades. I am a bit disappointed they didn't really have a presence in the denouement though. Yeah, probably would have felt forced to have them join the KO-35 rebuilding efforts or something, but I think their arc really deserves some sort of epilogue. Bulk being in 4 episodes of Lost Galaxy doesn't count. But switching gears to the main cast, they all got a lot more to work with than the MMPR cast did in White Light. Well, not all of them, but we get some good character work for Ashley, Astronema, Ecliptor, and Andros. Ashley probably has the least going on. She's really just a supporting character for Andros' storyline, but she's a crux of two of the episode's best emotional moments, her possibly final farewell to Andros and reuniting with him on the Astro Megaship. Astronema's depiction here is the culmination of her tragedy up to this point. She's only evil because she was either raised to be, not knowing anything else, or because she was literally brainwashed into it by Dark Spectre. Dark Spectre himself isn't really a compelling antagonist, just generically evil and not really cool or intimidating in the vein of Zed, but his main purpose is to serve as a vector for Astronema's current state, and the effects are palpable, especially when you know the full context. At every turn, Astronema is made to deny any opportunities to turn good, which ultimately leads to her doom when an attempt to kill her own brother is turned around on her. It's only by a quirk of fate she manages to survive and truly turn good. This brings us to Ecliptor. You wouldn't think the random evil general who looks like he belongs in a live-action adaptation of Cyber Chase would have much going for him, but as in the rest of the series, he shows a lot of genuine pride in and concern for Astronema. When she's killed, he swears vengeance on Andros, and the last moments of his life are spent fighting for his adoptive daughter. Pretty heavy for a self-admittedly evil warrior. I didn't even notice this until now, but just before Andros destroys Zordon's tube, you see Ecliptor reaching for Astronema's body. That's honestly a little heartbreaking, and it makes me feel like the decision of who gets killed and who gets transformed by the Z-Wave was made a bit arbitrarily. The implication seems to be that people with some good or love left in them survive, but if that's the case, how was Ecliptor worse in this regard than Divatox?
Feed upon their purity! Come forth and let evil twist their souls!
And then there's Andros himself. No surprise, Red Ranger, who has a personal tie to the villains, gets the most focus. His main thing is wanting to save his sister, thinking doing so will allow him to stop the evil invasion. That doesn't go well. The objections of everyone else are based around thinking Astronema, or Corone, is completely beyond saving. Andros has faith he can save her, and that faith ends up saving the day by leading him into the path of Zordon. After being mostly absent from the series since the beginning of Turbo, even getting captured by the United Alliance of Evil at the beginning of In Space, Zordon finally comes face to face with a Power Ranger again. Not any of the Rangers we've seen him bond with before, but still, Zordon sacrificing himself is a fitting way to close out what would later be known as the Zordon era and pile some more conflict on Andros. Power Rangers acting can sometimes be hokey, especially in these early years, and this episode isn't perfect.
Dark Spectre! What's going on?
This is as her boss is literally exploding, by the way. But pretty much every actor this episode is mostly believable in their performances, especially the ones who've been honing their characters throughout the last season, or last 6 seasons. I'm not gonna claim Power Rangers Endgame is some deep, life-changing experience, but I appreciate them working to add some emotional resonance so that the finale is more than just a big blowout. And this tone is helped by the music. In general, I prefer the earlier rock music to the synthesizer stuff in this season, but it does at least fit the scenes of invasion and desperate fighting well enough. Special effects and CGI aren't great, just look at those fighters, but this was a low-budget 90s show, and it's not like any of the kids were taken out of the story because of clumsy chroma keying or whatever. I certainly wasn't, even with more modern effects as a direct point of comparison, including on this disc. If you asked a long-time die-hard Power Rangers fan what their favorite finale is, well, they'd probably pick the first or second they watch, but if you manage to scoop the nostalgia part of their brain out with the PR-branded ladle, they'd probably say this one. Or The End of Time, maybe. It lives up to the promise of being a finale to Power Rangers as we knew it, and providing a satisfying conclusion to the characters of In Space specifically. And as an individual episode, it plays up the tension and plays down the comedy as is appropriate, and gives us several extremely memorable moments.
Them?
Do you think everyone now believes these guys are the same ones that have been serving as Rangers as far back as Mighty Morphin? Hey, I wanted to thank you for saving my life from the rapping pumpkin that one time. What?
The number of the day is 10!
Deviat, minion of Bugwoman Trakeena, obtained some data cards from a different bug alien in a pretty standard business transaction. Upon bringing the cards back to Trakeena, Deviat uses them to recreate some kind of dollar store brand Power Ranger knockoffs. These are the Psycho Rangers, evil Rangers originally fought last season, who Trakeena wants to turn on this season's Rangers. One by one, the Lost Galaxy cast is captured. Cinematography 101, there's nothing better for an ominous closing shot than a smashed tomato.
Yeah, don't ask me.
Brad Ranger?
It's radical, 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 freaking radical.
Red Ranger Leo manages to hold off Psycho Red long enough to be saved by Andros, who's wearing a weird, conspicuous, and expensive-looking red cloak. Props for sticking to the aesthetic, I guess? Since the Galaxy Rangers stole the Astro Mega Ship at the beginning of the season, I'm only half kidding, Leo and Andros are able to go there to recover. Andros retrieves his morpher, and the two Red Rangers go to the abandoned factory. Why does the space colony have an abandoned factory? Where the other Galaxy Rangers are kept.
2 Red Rangers. I'll go down in history.
Well, you know what they say. If you want to be a villain #1, you have to catch a pair of Rangers on the run. Leo and Andros distract the Psychos, while Leo's brother Mike, the guy in the non-Ranger looking knight armor, don't ask questions, frees the others. The Rangers regroup and are soon joined by some more unexpected guests. The Rangers team up to fight the Psychos, of course grouping up by color, and everyone puts on a really impressive fight, each pair working in sync really well and all pulling off different tactics. Oh, and Mike fights Deviat and this guy. I'm not saying his name because Kid Me never knew it, and he doesn't even speak in this episode. Doesn't seem like the kind of character that could be emotionally gripping anyway. The Rangers finally destroy the Psychos for real, we promise, and the Space Rangers decide to stick around to get a tour of the colony. But then Psycho Pink emerges from the rubble and is taken away by Deviat. You know, Kid Me was so curious about what this cliffhanger could lead to, and it took me years to find out. What did happen?
Death.
Power Rangers had team-ups with previous characters before. Specifically, Zeo brought back the Alien Rangers for a 2-parter, and In Space brought back Mighty Morphin's Adam and Turbo's Justin and Phantom Ranger, not counting the cameos in Countdown to Destruction. To the 10th Power, though, is what truly began the tradition of annual team-ups much like Super Sentai. Funnily enough, this episode has barely anything in common with Ginga Man vs. Mega Ranger as far as I can tell. This episode does unfortunately fall into a trap that's admittedly pretty easy to fall into, not just for a team-up, but for the show in general. Over-focus on the Red Ranger. Zzz. The other Galaxy Rangers get easily captured, save for Mike, who doesn't really get to do much at all, while the Space Rangers literally don't show up until the fight starts and they need to fulfill their contracts. The bulk of the crossover is with Leo and Andros, and what we see of them is good. Leo admiring Andros for helping save the Earth is a good moment, showing off the kind of reverence someone like him would have earned at this point, and Andros gets to reunite with Alpha, solemnly take up his morpher again, and call in his experience with the Psychos to help Leo. He does a good job coming off as an older, experienced Ranger coming out of retirement to deal with some unfinished business. And on some level, I get limiting the cast. It helps the episode feel tighter and allows them to make as awesome as it was. But it sadly leaves the other Space Rangers out in the cold, which could feel unfair if your favorite character was, for example, Carlos. Them pairing off with the Galaxy Rangers is still fun and does allow for some character expression, but it feels like too little too late in a way. Also, I'm getting this nagging feeling we're missing something here. Oh well. Admittedly, this is helped a bit by the next episode, which serves as part 2 of the crossover despite being separate episodes and titles. I'm pretty sure the only other season to use this format instead of a traditional 2-parter was SPD, and even then, its team-up episodes were spaced out, self-contained, and radically different.
No one gets inside!
No one gets inside!
No one gets
No
inside!
one gets inside!
No one gets inside!
And you could argue the entire season after that episode is technically one really long team-up, but let's not get into that. But the Space Rangers aren't the only old favorites here. After a return was set up in one of In Space's last episodes, this story finally brings back the Psycho Rangers for a true final showdown. They're as to the point as ever. They want to destroy their Power Ranger counterparts and have the sheer power to pull it off. This is shown off less so in the final fight, which is focused on the good Rangers being awesome, but more so when the Galaxy Rangers are being captured.
Watch out, Mario! He's behind you!
This includes an extended fight between Leo and Psycho Red, where the latter plants his sword in the ground to spin off it, which I love. The action choreography in this episode is amazing in general. I get their designs originate from Mega Ranger, but given all their footage here had to have been American-made, the American suit actors did a really good job channeling how strong and unrelenting the Psycho Rangers are. The voice actors also do a good job, especially, perhaps fittingly, Psycho Red. I think your enjoyment of this episode would hinge on how much you can look past Red favoritism and embrace the crossover aspects we do get. As a story, it's surprisingly well paced, with a ramp up of tension until Andros arrives, at which point the episode continually gets more triumphant until the other Space Rangers show up. It's a bit basic, but a complicated story would allow less time for in-space fan service, which is the real purpose of this episode. Heck, they couldn't even fit in a Zord fight with everything going on, though, again, this is technically only part 1. But save for that Psycho Pink cliffhanger, it's still a satisfying and fun story in its own right.
Our first targets are the Green and Yellow Rangers.
What do you mean green? If I can't kill a Black Ranger, I'm out.
The revenge ability lets me discard any soldier of yours that I choose.
So, brief recap. Lost Galaxy ended with the space colony the season was set on crash landing on Miranoi, homeworld of Yellow Ranger Maya, and the place where they found those neat swords that gave them powers. As such, the Earthlings decided this was as good a place as any to, well, colonize, and now it's roughly a year later, I think. And Earth year, to be clear. How long is a Miranoi year anyway? Leo reclaims his Quasar Saber from the rocks to fight an army of Grim Reapers until they and their demon boss fly away to Earth through a wormhole. This intro segment might be the highlight of the episode, honestly. The rain and thunder make for some great ambience that pairs amazingly with the villain's designs. So yeah, we peaked early. Also, quick thing, why does Lightspeed Rescue, and only Lightspeed Rescue, feel the need to include its characters' last names? It's the opening to a sci-fi action series, not their resume. On Earth, we're introduced to a girl named Heather as we see the Lightspeed Rangers using their powers to combat the deadliest monster of all, arson. Honestly, this part feels like it was deliberately written as an introduction for Lost Galaxy fans who hadn't been watching Lightspeed. There were probably a few people who thought, firefighters are lame, give me more bug suicide bombers. Heather sees the Grim Reaper things, called ghouls, capture her mom. Naturally, she makes a sensible decision and tells an adult about the building having a giant wrinkly rat infestation, only to be met by this woman.
Now you know, dear, there's no such thing as monsters.
Demons, aliens, and mutants, of course. Monsters? What do you think this is, Undertale? The demon guy, Triskull, tells Olympius, actual demon and son of Big Bad Queen Banshira, that he's draining human life energy for the queen, but we soon discover Triskull's real boss is the woman whose name is in the title. Imagine that. While Red Ranger Carter finds and teams up with Heather, Leo arrives on Earth and fights some ghouls alongside the other Lightspeed Rangers. Carter and Heather are also attacked by ghouls, but rescued by the Yellow and Blue Galaxy Rangers. Everyone rendezvous at Lightspeed's underwater base, including Heather because she fainted during the fight. After Leo recaps Trakeena's defeat, everyone goes off to fight Triskull. This fight doesn't go well, somehow not because they thought bringing the little girl was a good idea. Also, this is literally the first time I've seen a noteworthy difference in video quality between American and Sentai footage. This fight gets a bit jarring at points. While the demons discover Triskull's true allegiance, Carter has Heather pull the fire alarm to evacuate the building where Trakeena's hideout is because this 9-year-old was a real big-name actor. You needed to get your money's worth if she's on your cast. We get more Red Ranger team-up as Carter and Leo kill Triskull. I know the show would say destroy, but look at this, we see him go limp. Usually monsters just explode and leave no body behind. This is kind of weird. The green and pink Galaxy Rangers show up, but everyone gets knocked out a window by Trakeena. Olympius shows up and attacks the Rangers, I think because he's bored.
Galaxy Red! Galaxy Green!
Galaxy Blue!
Redlings, destroy them!
As Trakeena absorbs the life energy, Olympius adds a poison that mutates her into that thing. The Lightspeed Rangers summon their Omega Megazord, impeccable name, to fight, while the Galaxy Rangers just have to sit around until their Zords show up. Said Zords don't really help anything and get soundly beaten, but the Galaxy Rangers are able to use their own power-up on the Omega Megazord. With 10 Rangers stuffed in a single cockpit, Trakeena is finally defeated for good through the power of a constellation. Heather gets a medal, and everyone parts ways. Like to the 10th power, this episode involves bringing back an old villain and primarily focusing on the Red Ranger above the rest of the previous team. The old villain thing would become a pretty standard trope, though the Red focus would pretty much get phased out for team-ups after this season. Except for Samurai. And the next episode on the DVD. But this episode isn't just a rehash of the last team-up, though maybe a rehash would have been better. Let's start with the elephant in the room, Heather. I found her annoying when I was a kid, but honestly I kinda like her now. Child actors can be hit or miss, but this one performed well and actually felt childishly endearing.
Lightspeed Rescue!
An episode about Carter teaming up with a little kid to save her parents from a monster of the week is a pretty good episode premise, but not when it's shoved into the seasonal team-up episode like a jug of orange juice poured onto a pizza. The need to keep Heather around results in her being shoehorned in where it isn't appropriate. This is most notable when they bring her to the fight with Triskull for no reason other than she wanted to go with. Heather's story is okay on its own, but it ends up distracting from the precious time we have to reunite with the Galaxy Rangers and fight Trakeena. Although despite the pacing and tonal issues that result from this, the episode does arguably do some cross crossover aspects better than To the 10th Power. Most notably, the non-Red Rangers show up earlier, and we get more of the Rangers interacting during downtime. Unfortunately, until the epilogue, it's really just relegated to exposition and talking about what's going on instead of any character exploration. And sadly, there's also some behind-the-scenes problems to go over. If you didn't notice, Trakeena isn't played by her original actress, Amy Miller. Apparently this was a result of a pay dispute and/or thinking she had too little screen time, and yeah, both of those track. I will say, knowing this, it is utterly hilarious that Trakeena's motivation is hating the Power Rangers for taking away the beauty she used to possess. For what it's worth, the context behind Trakeena's current state does a decent job papering over the cracks, but this is yet another reason they really shouldn't have slapped Heather in. Danny Slavin, Leo's actor, also left over a pay dispute partway through production, so some of his lines were dubbed by someone else. And the dubber...
You're in for a big disappointment.
Yeah, I think that about sums it up. This episode just feels a bit clumsy and sloppy in general, honestly. On top of everything else, they don't use the Lost Galaxy morphing sequence, instead using Ginga Man's transformation footage, in the process managing to accidentally whitewash a character.
Well, that's real nice.
My favorite parts of Trakeena's revenge are probably the parts where you can't see anything, the moody rain fight and the climax. Lost Galaxy technically already did a crossover Zord fight in the episode after To the 10th Power, but this one showing the Galaxy Rangers powering up the Lightspeed Rangers Megazord is honestly one of my favorite Zord moments in the show. It helps that we're once again set at night, which again helps elevate the mood. And both moments I just mentioned were at least 90% Sentai footage. Whoops. Heck, the episode can't even pull this off without issue, because the Galactic Beast's arrival is one, old heroes arrive at the exact moment they're needed, too many in my opinion. At least in the Sentai, their version of Mike had gone on a quest to resurrect them or something. Honestly, even as a kid, this was my least favorite episode on the DVD. Granted, that was partially due to me cringing at Heather's presence for no good reason, but the rest of the episode didn't help that much. A lack of focus on the episode's main selling point, Heather's lack of interaction with the Galaxy Rangers making the two plots feel even more at odds, and characters making bizarre decisions for no real reason made this episode feel a lot duller and more slapdash than it should have, and my feelings have only worsened as I've gotten older. For every other episode on this DVD, I could see someone making a coherent argument why it's the best episode in the series. Not so for this one. It's still enjoyable, but enjoyable isn't enough for a supposed top 5 episode.
Those miserable Galaxy Rangers destroyed my magnificent beauty.
Beauty, huh? That's what you're gonna call it? Also, you were kinda sorta possessed by Deviat last time he died. Is he still rattling around in your head somewhere? If you thought the last 3 episodes zeroed in on the Red Rangers too much, you're in for a treat. The remnants of the Machine Empire from Zeo, led by a General Venjix, hold on, my eye's twitching a little bit, have discovered the remains of Serpentera, a Zed once used by Lord Zord himself. Andros, still clad in a conspicuous red cloak, witnesses this and retreats when the bad guys chase him with cyborg horses. At least, I really hope they're cyborgs. After a cutaway to Bulk and Skull running a resort, Carter shows up to recruit Wild Force Red Ranger Cole for a special mission. Not any of the other Wild Force Rangers, cause, you know, they're not red. Losers. Cole and Carter rendezvous with a bunch of other Red Rangers at a spaceport and learn they need to go to the moon in a new Astro Megaship. The weird thing here is that 2 or 3 of these guys have already been to the moon.
Theodore J. Jarvis Johnson.
Please, just call me TJ.
I thought you weren't interested in this kind of entertainment, TJ.
I'm not. I'm just saying, don't forget the magic pony.
Just as they're about to leave, Jason shows up fashionably late.
You didn't think I was gonna let you do this without the original Red Ranger, did you?
Grace Sterling says hi, Jason. After a leisurely 239,000-mile flight, the Red Rangers all fight the Cogs for a bit, until Cole realizes they're just letting the General slip off and chases after them. This nearly gets Cole killed, but he's rescued by Leo and Orico, the Red Alien Ranger. After one of the only times you could spend more than a minute on morphing sequences without getting annoying, the Red Rangers pair off to fight the Generals. Cool fighting ensues until Venjix decides to stop wasting time and pilot Serpentera. Cole destroys it by throwing a bird at it. Or a bird-shaped motorcycle, I guess. The Red Rangers return to Earth and say their goodbyes, then argue over which of them is the coolest. Yeah, that was a very quick synopsis. I've gotten more words out of summarizing some Word Girl episodes, but perhaps that's to be expected. If you remove all the fan service and deep lore, the episode has by far the most basic story of all these episodes. A bunch of robots want to destroy the planet, and the only force that can stop them is the Expendables, but red. The hook comes from bringing back a ton of old characters, all of whom were pretty much the main characters of their seasons, and seeing them interact and shake butt with each other. The Unmorph fight is my favorite part of the episode, nearly 2 straight minutes of 8 skilled fighters. They all fight differently, even if only slightly, and there's some really cool and striking shots. Eric kicking a cog into an office desk, Andros throwing a cog into a pit, Carter standing out with his use of a blaster, and Wes using a cog's baton. I also just love the music. The episode's music in general is great, but the Unmorphed fight theme in particular makes me want to jump out of my chair and do pretend karate moves. The morph fight isn't as impressive, which is a little odd given it being longer and technically having more unique and spectacular fighting, but maybe years of superhero movies have made actual martial arts comparatively refreshing. It is still really cool though. Much like To the 10th Power, it pairs off the Rangers and gives different pairs different tactics. I don't know if this was on purpose, but it feels like they ramp up in the use of weapons and abilities with each successive pair, from Cole and Jason being pure hand-to-hand to Andros and Carter using blasters pretty much exclusively. And it keeps going with the striking cinematography, like with Tommy doing a bullet time kick or Leo slashing a general as he leaps from a dust cloud. It doesn't go without hiccups. There's some moments like a general bobbing up and down in the air or a less than seamless cut, but this is honestly the most impressed I've been with a Power Rangers episode visually. The story is overall tight and succeeds at setting up a coherent threat that justifies the Red Ranger team up both in and out of universe, calling back to 2 previous villains simultaneously. The way the threat is dealt with though, yeah, that was kinda dumb. Using the bird motorcycle, finishing Serpentera off so easily, and having only Cole fight it might work if it was only one of these elements, except maybe the last one, but all in tandem make the ending very rushed and disappointing. To be fair, this wasn't entirely the crew's fault. On top of needing to squeeze 9 old Rangers in, there were some behind the scenes issues. Disney made them cut it down from the 2-parter they initially planned, and Bandai made them promote the motorcycle toy in exchange for footing the bill because hey, this is expensive in 2001. What's not expensive? Giving time for the characters to talk. Most of the Reds' interactions are introducing each other or discussing the threat, but that short scene at the very end of everyone arguing over who has the biggest stick, which of them is the coolest, is better than everything To the 10th Power and Trakeena's Revenge gave us combined.
Did I ever tell you guys about the time I got baked in a giant pizza?
TJ definitely likes to get funky. This episode is a party first and foremost, celebrating the franchise's history at a scale the show would only rarely come close to again. There's a ton of little details I could point out, like the generals reusing suits from a show PR had a sibling rivalry with back in the day, but even if you don't know or care about all this, I honestly think you could find this a simple but exciting action flick, as long as you like the color red. I think it's pretty clear what the common thread between all these episodes is. The fact that literally all of them involve space travel. The fact that all of these are spectacle episodes. We got 3 team-ups, a big finale, and a massive status quo shift centered on an extremely popular character. These are things that grab a fan's attention, stick in a fan's mind, but are they necessarily the best the series has to offer? Some of these episodes fall a bit short of that promise, but others were genuinely well-executed stories. None of them hold a candle to Reflection from SPD, but that episode didn't exist yet, so I'll give them a pass. In fact, let's do a brief countdown of these episodes real quick to get into this. Number 5, Trakeena's Revenge. A lot of promise, but let down by a lack of focus that made the episode feel haphazard and lacking what you'd come to a team-up episode for. Number 4, White Light. Good, but not great. After a strong start, the episode flounders a bit with some clumsily dropped plot points and poor editing, though as I joked with Ju 2, this wasn't necessarily unique to this episode. Does really well with tone though. Number 3, To the 10th Power. A really fun team-up with a great ending fight. Doesn't really do anything particularly unique among team-ups though. Number 2, Forever Red. Despite a mishandled ending, this episode has some amazing action and manages to give all 10 of its principal characters at least some spotlight. Number 1, Countdown to Destruction. The only episode here that tries to elicit more investment than, whoa, that's cool. A coherent emotional core and memorable moments supported by concrete character development elevate this one. I think the top 3 are not necessarily necessarily the objective best, but I can buy someone thinking they're worthy of that position beyond the most superficial aspects. Besides, the voting pool consisted of up to 458 episodes, so I think it's fair that voters at the time weren't necessarily trying to think over the best morals, twists, character development, or bad hip talk.
You don't have a lot of time, so you better get with the program, Slick.
I got tired of the same old rag, so I busted out the fat gear.
Major Funky.
For my part, this may have been the best possible introduction to the wider history of Power Rangers as a kid, spanning the first Saban run, showing episodes from 5 different seasons, and characters from even more. It really gave me a taste of what the franchise was like beyond the early Disney era. Sure, said era is still my favorite part of the show, but I'm honestly convinced I wouldn't be as passionate about the show today if I hadn't grown to appreciate its legacy so early on. Or maybe I could have just watched one episode of Dino Thunder again, I don't know.
I should have been the one to fill your light with dark soul.